Hi, I'm Melissa Simpson, and I'm here with Bob Podgurski. How are you, Bob?
Great. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Not a problem, not a problem. So now, you've come out with a new book recently.
Yes, it came out in 2012, The Sacred Alignments and Dark Side of Sigils.
So tell me about it.
Well, this book is the culmination of a good 25 years of research combined with field work. And in a nutshell, it's essentially tackling a discovery I had made, an image I had perceived, the grid sigil. This grid sigil, initially I was to equate with the first Enochian called a spirit, and the sigil itself represents or depicts, in one sense, the four elements, the tetragrammaton, fire, air, earth, and water, as suspended within space and time. But as I had worked through it, and as the title suggests, sacred alignments, as I began to align myself with different fields of research, I began to see other disciplines, other facets beginning to line up that elucidated and shed light upon it. So I bring that up because an initial reaction by some is, oh, it's about Enochian magic. No, it isn't. It's a system which is underpinned to an extent by the Enochian magic of John Dee and Sir Edward Kelley, but it is not solely based or structured around that.
Very interesting, very interesting. So, Bob, you've told me that you have a master's degree in English.
Yes.
And obviously that has helped you out in writing this book. How has your life and the path that you're on taken you to writing this book?
Well, the degree in English really stemmed from my first love of poetry and writing poetry. And then as I became acquainted with occult studies, eventually reading texts such as Agrippa's De Occulta Philosophia, where he talks about the Orphic mysteries and the idea of language as being a charged element, the voice, vocalization, the vibration of words is actually not being an arbitrary signification, but something itself which taps into a latent reservoir of energy. And so that led me to an interest in Enochian magic because it is a system based upon chance, the vibrating of specific calls that deal with the evocation of angelic forces. But then down the road, I became more and more interested in the work of Austin Spare and his concept of sigilization, because for Spare, the idea of the sigil as a visual representation, the equivalent in the East of being yantra, the visual representation, the verbal aspect of the magical or tantric act being the mantra. And so that was one way I was able to initially understand and perceive the grid sigil as a sigillic or yantric component correlating to the mantra of the calls. And so I've become interested in this interface between the visual, the unspoken tools that are utilized to tap into the subconscious reservoir of energy, and how that basically interfaces and acts as a catalyst along with the chanted word, the sense that poetry, that all chanted poetry is a magical thing.
That's absolutely fascinating. Of course, with Austin Osman Spare, now, how do you feel that your work is like his? I mean, explain how Spare's was and then compare it to your own.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, for me, Spare's work is a stepping stone. It is a foundational aspect of my work. I'm not sure how much my work is like Austin Spare's. In establishing what Spare had arrived at ultimately, he was concerned with one aspect. He was concerned with creating a system that was able to bypass the various trappings, elements, extraneous tools that ritual magic tends to lay a heavy emphasis upon. Spare himself was involved with Crowley, eventually split from Crowley and the AA, and became somewhat disparaging of it. Spare, the classic example of one of Spare's method of sigilization is to first express a desire. I desire the strength of a tiger. And then by eliminating, taking out vowels, leaving the consonants, and just rearranging them in a seemingly haphazard order to create a design, almost like a mandala. But Spare was a great artist, so it wasn't just an arbitrary thing, it was an aesthetically pleasing image too. For Spare, as he put it, there's no such thing as black magic, all magic is colorful. So I became interested in, and Spare said these sigils are developed so that one focuses upon them in times of stress or anger or what have you. And then what essentially happens is that stress or that anger is then converted and utilized as an energy. It's no longer, one can basically see that Spare is looking at those energies as not being negative or positive, but something that can actually be utilized and then rechanneled towards manifesting the desire. His concept, I think, sort of sums up his little dictum. Symbols, the conscious mind relates to. Sigils, the subconscious relates to.
Absolutely.
And so that's where, that is sort of the crux and the nexus of his system, and where I found that it was something that could probably be put to a fairly prodigious use in incorporating it within the Enochian system, which has largely been relegated to the realm of high ceremonial magic. Mm-hmm. And so this was a way of not necessarily advancing it, but taking it in a new direction.
Right, kind of like bridging the gap.
Yes, more or less, yes.
Absolutely. So Bob, could you talk more about the unique nature of the grid sigil itself?
Sure. Well, just so the audience actually has an idea, it's a good idea to see what we're speaking about, because we are talking about a visual medium. The grid sigil, one of the interesting things about it to me was that at one point I was considering the connection between Spare's use of sigils and sigils as tools of evocation, the traditional medieval formula where a magician would take a magical square and by working off of a pattern of numbers within that square, and this is a grossly oversimplified version, connecting the numbers as they relate to a planetary influence, one would create a sigil, right, which could then be traced in the air astrally and used as a summoning device for a spirit. Where this grid sigil differs from that is that it is more of a three-dimensional tool. Mm-hmm. If we look at the idea of the lesser ritual, the banishing ritual, the pentagram, as Rigardi said, that was done to set up clear space. The rose cross ritual, one employs to maintain the peace or the sanctity of the space that has been banished. And the rose cross ritual essentially is creating a cube around the magician and invoking Yeshua within crosses of it to create an energy field, which I had to think about it quite a bit, and it seemed to me that this was almost like an astral version of a Reichian orgone accumulator. And then as I thought about that, looking at the grid sigil, then just by looking at it, one can see that the 4 elements within water, earth, fire, and air, within the rays of time and space, if one gazes upon the picture long enough, the rays of time and space actually go beyond the frame of the image. It expands. They, in a sense, depict concentric circles without a circumference. And by being able to formulate the grid sigil as an astral tool, one can actually use it as a means to detect energy or power zones, was something I discovered. Much like a dowser uses a wand, a physical thing like a piece of willow in sympathetic magic to detect underground springs, that the grid sigil could be used by repositioning it, moving it around, is to give somebody a means whereby they may be able to detect hot spots or power zones. And if one isn't able to create it astrally, then just to draw it on a piece of paper and then to be able to move it around and see when and where it may feel different. In that sense, it's an extra dimensional tool. The images within it, too, the components are fairly familiar. You see an alpha and an omega, a tau and an omicron. The alpha and omega, very reminiscent of the Christogram or the Labar of Constantine.
Okay.
And in that respect, it made me also think one step further that here is the notion of a extra-dimensional tool that is in that gray area between symbol that the conscious mind relates to and sigil, the subconscious. So it's acting as a nexus point between them. And the reason why I wanted to explain this is because one of my interests, my concerns in writing the book, was that even if one does not find a direct affinity with this tool itself, that I have developed a workable theory that allows one to then in turn potentially discover or develop one's own grid sigils.
Absolutely.
And that being my concern is not to take a dictatorial stance, but to create an expanding open system which allows for creative appropriation and manipulation and assimilation into other systems.
Fascinating, very fascinating. So, Bob, this is a very fascinating book, and I'm sure other people would love to obtain it. Where could I get this?
Okay, in Europe, in England, because it is a fairly large book, 12 by 12 square, in order to save on shipping costs if one is in Europe, best to go straight to the publisher, which is Mandrake Press Ltd. And I believe the publisher has an eBay store as well as his own retail outlet through his website. In the U.S., there are 2 primary distributors. In the East Coast, Weiser Antiquarian Books in York Beach, Maine. And on the West Coast, it would be J.D. Holmes Booksellers.
Excellent, excellent. Well, now I know that you're going to be presenting at the conference, the Left Hand Path Consortium.
Indeed.
And I'm really excited about that. And of course, I'll be filming it. And again, I'm Melissa Simpson, and I'm here with Bob Podgurski, and he's going to be presenting at the Left Hand Path Consortium. So please come to the Left Hand Path Consortium, and you can talk more with Bob Podgurski.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Melissa.
Not a problem, not a problem. Thank you.
It was
Have
great.
a good day.
I appreciate it.